Hello, and thank you for playing Elite. Once you've read through the opening flavor text of the rulebook and verified all the components in your box, you can follow along at the victory points and acts sections. Each act of Elite is timed by counting down a certain aspect of players' collective participation. In Act 1, play counts down each time a capital is built. Act 2 counts down the attack actions. Act 3 is a little different. Acts 1 and 2 always start counting from the number of players. Once the dial reaches 0, move the act marker one space to the right and reset the dial. When the end of Act 2 is triggered, all players will roll their colored game dice once. The lowest number showing is the number of full rounds left in the game, starting with the next player's immediate turn. At the end of Act 3, tally victory points based on these 5 metrics. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a bit more understanding about what those mean. Players can use one of their upgrade tokens, which are irrelevant at the end of the game, to count points along the Elite victory track. Please note in the rulebook a 2-player alternate rule for Act 2 timing. Now that you know the general overview and goal of the game, let's get set up. Proceed through steps 1 through 3 at the top of the page and use the images as guides. Set all the resources and dice beside the board. Each player needs one of their tall markers placed at 5 on the attribute tracks. Verify the positions of the act and dial markers. Each player needs another tall marker placed at 0 on both control tracks. Give each player 3 elite mats, 1 of each achievement card randomly drawn, and all components of their color, along with 3 gold. The black and white elite card can be used to mark first player. All action mats are designed to fit alongside the board in any configuration. The global action should be placed in an order such that produce appears first. But nothing else about the order matters. You can set up your play area vertically or horizontally, whatever is most convenient for the table. All players in Mat's components are the same. Armies, the elite leader token, villages, upgrades, and capitals. I've set aside 3 villages with the elite because those will be immediately moved to the board for game opening placements. You should keep the reference card close by for acts and victory points. Keep your achievement cards a secret until you accomplish them during the game. Alright, we are ready to begin gameplay. Proceed through the 3 steps at the bottom of the page, and then begin standard clockwise turns. Roll to determine the first player, in my case Red. Red takes an elite with a village and places them in any territory on the map. The second player follows, taking one of their elite and a village, placing it in a different territory on the map. No 2 opposing villages may ever occupy the same territory in Elite. The third player continues by placing their village and an elite together somewhere on the map. There is no limitation for these opening placements. Any new territory is legal. Next, placement order snakes backward. This third player now places their second and third villages onto the board with elite. 2 villages of the same color may occupy the same territory. The second player now completes their second and third placements, and the first player theirs. Starting placement is now complete. For the remainder of the game, all movements must follow normal rules. Play will now proceed clockwise, with each player completing normal turns according to the 5 steps on their 2 colored global action mats, which will be explained now. The next page of the rulebook contains thematic text flavoring your experience of Elite. There are also some important terms and concepts. Reading this page will help you better understand the remainder of the rulebook. However, many new players simply want to begin the game as quickly as possible, so I'm going to loop back around to page 5 later. For now, page 6 is your best guide for starting normal turns immediately. Let's look at our 2 colored player mats and discuss the 5 global actions. I recommend orienting these mats so that produce is at the top, because these 5 actions must proceed in order each turn. You'll notice I've also taken the 2 green mats from out of the box and flipped them over. On the back of all action mats in Elite is a beginner's guide to each action with brief descriptions and extra notes. The first action on every player's turn will be produce. The standard production without any upgrades is 3 civilian locations. This means villages and capitals. Capitals count as 1 location but produce 2 resources. Red currently does not have any capitals on the map. They only occupy a fuels territory, and on the other side of the world, a metals and agriculture territory. So Red simply proceeds to the resource supply and draws 1 of each for their 3 villages: metals, agriculture, and fuels. Those villages were their starting placement, so Red didn't have much choice here. But in the future, they will likely have at least 1 civilian located in each of the 5 resource types. Each village or capital can only produce once per turn, so choices will need to be made. The standard move action is 1 unit, 1 space. Unit refers only to elite and/or armies. But Red doesn't currently have any armies on the map, so they are just going to move 1 elite, 1 space. The choice is which elite to move where. You can only assemble new villages in a territory where your elite occupies, so the player should consider her future expansion and production strategy, including her achievement cards. A moving piece may use any adjacent shipping or land route. And that was the move action. Later, you can upgrade for moving more units or more spaces. I invite you to read page 7 along with me now. The assemble action is how players add new villages onto the map. You will choose between rally or subjugate every turn for attempting to assemble this new civilian location inside one of your 3 elites' territories. A rally requires a roll of your game die and succeeds on 1 through 3. Later, you can utilize control dice to succeed on more values, but Red isn't quite there yet. So for now, they take a roll and ouch, a 5 fails. Let's assume it was a 1. So now they get to take a village and add it to the board. By the way, be sure to establish before their roll exactly which territory they were assembling in, so that they know to place it with that particular elite and don't change their mind after seeing the roll results. A successful rally recognizes more control over your alliance. Always look to the control tracks after assembling. For a rally, you have a choice to move your marker up the unity control track or the tyranny control track. Regardless, always take any control dice or any support penalties when your marker passes those icons. For example, at the very first step of the tyranny track, they would have to lose 3 support. Adjust that marker immediately on the other side of the board. Now, let's back all this up. Suppose Red wanted to use the subjugate instead. This is the alternate version of the assemble action, for if you don't want to risk the dice. A subjugation always costs 1 strength, over here on the attributes track. Now, after paying that elite strength, they immediately get to put the village out onto the map. It's an automatic successful assembling. If you subjugate, you may only gain tyranny control, not unity. You may only assemble 1 village per turn. If you roll a rally failure, unfortunately, you do not add a village to the map that turn. You may still perform all other actions as usual. Elite actions are up next. Once you've moved this white token to mark one of your elite as your alliance leader, all 12 elite actions become available on future turns. You'll only be limited by the resources that you have. However, at the beginning of the game, you do not yet have an elected leader. That only occurs once you've assembled your 4th village onto the map. Some players may choose to subjugate simply to ensure they successfully assemble that 4th village, rather than relying on the fate of the dice roll. So, upon successfully assembling your 4th village, you must immediately perform the elect action 1 time. This 1 time, it does not cost any resources. It's a free election. Roll your game die, and according to the results, move the marker to that elite action mat. A 4 means the elite economist will be Red's leader. Now, throughout the entire game, including right now, the result of an election actually only takes effect on your following turn. So, Red cannot perform elite actions this turn. Next round, when it comes back around to them, they will produce, move, assemble, and then perform elite actions. All 12 actions are described on page 6, but they're explained in much more detail on the back of the rulebook, page 8, which is a convenient reference sheet during the game. I will go through all elite actions in detail in just a few minutes. For now, though, let's assume that Red, on their next turn, is performing elite actions and they paid all their resource costs to the bank. Whichever action they choose to do, they take those resources and put them back in the supply. Now they move to the fifth and final portion of a player's turn, which is to provide. Provide is the only action during your turn that is required. Once you've assembled your 8th village or drafted your 8th army, you must consistently end your turns by paying 1 agriculture for each icon that is revealed on your mat. Luckily, this won't be haunting you until a bit later in the game. Once the time comes, you must always end your turn by providing an agriculture to the supply from your hand. Now, there are 2 ways to avoid the provide requirement. If you have the agriculture symbol revealed at the beginning of your turn, but you build a capital, that village will be returned to your mat and cover that agriculture icon, which means no need to provide at the end of this turn. But let's assume that the icon is still visible for Red. What happens if a player doesn't have the agriculture to provide, or they simply choose not to? This is where the death result occurs. If you do not assist your alliance with the logistics of providing food, your citizens will begin to die off. You may choose any of your alliance's villages to perish from the map, but you must remove enough to cover up that agriculture icon. This is at most 3. These same rules apply for the army's provision icon. Now, each death also costs you 1 support over on the attributes track. Adjust your marker on that column immediately. I'll explain later what happens at the bottom of that track. This now concludes a full turn. Once the player has provided, or not provided as explained, their turn is finished and play proceeds clockwise to the next player. Every turn you will proceed through these 5 actions in order: produce, move, assemble, elite actions, provide. But the elite actions do not need to be in any sort of order among themselves. You can perform each as many times as you can afford with your resources. The only exception is elect. That's only once per turn. But again, these can be in any order, and you are not tied to the 4 actions your elite leader currently occupies. Let's cover the 4 politics actions first. Elect is what we did a moment ago for free. Pay 1 fuel and gold to roll the die and find out who your citizens have elected. You will change your elite leader marker. However, that only takes effect next turn. So for the rest of this turn, the economist remains Red's leader. Now, what does that mean? The leader gets a discount when performing the 4 actions on their mat, based on this opaque symbol here, the first icon. So the elite politician, for example, would get a 1 fuel discount on all their actions. Now, Red's politician is taking over on their next turn, according to the elect roll, so he might want to wait until then to perform these 4 particular actions. Another thing, an election always gains 1 support, so go move your support marker up immediately. This attribute benefits occurs even if you happen to roll the same number which your elite leader marker is currently on. Now, when this happens, you may be a bit peeved because it feels like a wasted election, and elect is the only action limited to once per turn. No matter how many fuel and gold resources you have, you can't keep doing the election to wait and see if you get the result you want. So, this is the second value of control dice. We saw control dice help us earlier with succeeding on a rally, but here, for an election, it gives you control. If you move past a die, you take that color and you move it to your mats. And now you can use this to influence the results of the election and choose any elite leader when that number is rolled. For example, a 3 here would become a wild for Red. They could choose anyone to be their elite leader on their next turn. All right, next is mobilize. This is how you upgrade movement. Go up to your first global actions mat under these markers. 2 units first, then 3 units, or skip to 2 spaces for your elite or armies. For example, if we took this third upgrade, all Red's elites could now be chosen for 2 spaces of movement for the rest of the game in the future. It's as simple as that. Okay, propagandize. You can use this action to boost your support or control. Pay the fuel and electronics, then pay additional gold, as much as you'd like and in any combination, to increase 1 step of support and or 1 step of control, multiple times if you can. For example, if Red had 4 gold, they could use 1 gold to increase 1 support, and then 3 gold simultaneously to increase 1 control on either the Unity or Tyranny track. If you pass dice or support effects, immediately take those, and you can add it to your mats for this turn. It doesn't have to go with politics or economists, it can go on any mat. And you can propagandize multiple times per turn if you can afford the gold. Okay, taxation, the fourth and final politics action. Pay 3 fuels and 1 agriculture, then immediately count up your villages and capitals currently out on the map. Gain from the supply 1 gold per village and 2 gold per capital. But you must also lose 3 support. Adjust your marker accordingly. Now, at the bottom of this track is something called an uprising. I'll explain that later, but in short, your villages may leave your alliance. Just know that those villages do count for collecting gold before any uprising takes effect. Let's look at economy next. These actions are discounted 1 gold if the economist is your elite leader. You may have noticed the first action on each elite mat is the action potentially affected by control dice. Capitalize is taking a capital and putting it on the map, replacing one of your current villages. The benefit is during production, capitals produce 2 resources, but only count as 1 civilian location. Also, they give you 2 gold on the tax action. Before you get too excited, pay attention to this. You do not simply choose any village in your alliance to upgrade to a capital. The fate of your game die will decide. Narratively speaking, this is your own civilians' economic markets deciding which village in the world is growing into a capital. Red rolls 1. By default, 1 results in a capital on an agriculture territory. So Red takes the capital and replaces their only agriculture territory village because they rolled a 1. That capital must be placed in an agriculture territory. You always gain 2 support for capitalizing. Immediately adjust your marker on that track on the board. And you gain this increase even if your dice rolls a territory type which none of your villages currently occupy. Now, if that happens, it is a massive loss of resources because you do not in fact gain a capital even though you paid the cost. You only get a measly 2 support. So Red does not have any other capital potential for future agriculture rolls. So they can use control dice to prevent that catastrophe. Now, here I'm noticing that this tyranny control die here is coincidentally showing a 1. So technically, this would have been a wild roll for Red. They could have capitalized on any territory resource type. 6 is always wild like that from the beginning of the game. But in the future, Red can add even more control dice here to make other numbers wild according to their strategy. By the way, Unity or Tyranny control dice do not yield different effects on your mats. The Fortify action is simple. Pay the gold and metal, gain 3 strength. Adjust your marker on the board. Strength is used to pay for subjugation and optimized production. Also, strength helps protect your elite from attacks. Emigrate moves one of your villages 1 space to an adjacent territory. Capitals cannot be emigrated, and the move is only legal if no enemy civilians occupy the new territory. Evolve is a very important action. You may take any control die on your mat and change its face and or move it onto a different mat. For each gold and electronics resource pair you pay, you may affect 1 control die, Unity or Tyranny. Let's conclude with the military actions. I'll skip attack for now because you cannot attack until you have armies on the board. Optimize. Pay metal and agriculture to upgrade production. Go to your global mats. You must upgrade 4, 5, and 6 in that order. Normally you produce on 3 civilian locations, so these are big benefits. Or you can skip all 3 of those and remove the 7 production upgrade. Now, when you optimize to 7 civilian locations, you'll see an icon there designating a loss of 2 strength. Do not pay that now. Deduct that strength on future turns if you choose to produce then in 7 locations. Alright, Next is draft. This is how you get armies onto the map. You cannot perform attack or terrorize until you draft at least one army. Draft costs 2 metal plus 1 gold for each army you want to enlist. You see, this draft has plus icon here. That's just like Propagandize, where there was a base resource cost plus additional gold for support and control. Draft is 2 metal base cost plus additional 1 gold per army. So, we go up to our global actions mat and remove the armies. Remember, when you reach 8, you will be forced to provide an agriculture. Place the armies in any territory where you have civilians. That refers to villages or capitals. The armies from this one turn do not even need to be placed in the same territory. You can spread them out, including even in a territory where an enemy currently has armies, as long as you have a capital or village in that territory. So what can you do with those armies? On your next turn, you could move them into enemy territory. With mobilize upgrades, you could move up to 2 or 3 armies, and if you mobilize this last option, your armies can move 2 spaces. So on their next turn, Red could take one of these armies, now that they're on the board, and move it 2 spaces to aggress these blue pieces. But remember, if you want to move them, you'll have to wait until next turn. The global actions must always be done in this order, and the elite actions where you're drafting occur after the move action. So, if Red waited and did that move on their following turn, they could attack this elite or terrorize this village. The attack action is used against elite or armies, while the terrorize action is used against villages or capitals. The first choice is to attack enemy armies. Your armies must occupy the same territory as theirs. Interesting that Red here already had blue armies occupying their capital's territory, so they could attack the same turn as drafting, unlike on this side of the world, where they needed to move their armies to attack. Either way, when attacking army versus army, both alliances take battle dice. Attacker one color, defender another. Use 1 die per army that you have in the battle. So in this territory, it would be 2 versus 2. Both players roll, and simply sum the dice of each color. The higher total wins. The loser must remove 1 army from that territory. If they had tied, both alliances lose 1 army. If they tied or won, the attacker gains a battle token, which is worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. Now, each attack action only ever results in at most 1 army per side perishing. For another attack, Red would need to pay the resource cost again. On the mat, this left section for control dice says, add battle dice against armies. Let's say Blue had some control dice in this section of their mat. For these control dice, it does not matter which numbers face up. The benefit is simply based on quantity. Those 3 control dice combined actually give Blue an additional 3 dice when rolling for this battle, even though they are the defenders. As always, the tyranny and unity perform the same functions. So if Blue had rolled all 5 of these, they would have won the battle, and Red would have to remove an army. However, Blue would not have gained a battle token. Only the attack action on your turn can earn you a victory battle token. Now let's say instead of attacking against armies, we wanted to attack an enemy elite. That is still the same resource cost, but it's the second sub-option for attacking. This printed one here, by default, means only a roll of 1 hits the elite. When armies attack elite, it is a roll of your game die rather than battle dice, and it does not matter how many armies you have present. Let's say Red rolls 1. The opposing blue elite now loses 1 strength on their attributes track. That isn't too powerful. Everyone starts at 5, so reducing that to 4 is hardly worth the attack. To do more damage, use control dice. In this right section here, you must place them incrementally in ascending order. Tyranny or unity doesn't matter. Now, with this greater control over their armies, Red will hit on a 1 or 2 or 3. Assuming they rolled 3, the blue elite would lose 3 strength. Until the enemy hits 0 strength, Red hasn't accomplished anything notable. They must continue to pay resources again for another attack. Let's say they do that and roll a 2. 2 is a hit, and it is enough to reduce Blue to 0. Blue would remove their elite politician from the board permanently, which is a huge blow to their power and expansion. In reward for this victory, Red gains 3 battle tokens, worth a total of 6 points. Blue can no longer elect this elite politician as their leader, but they can still perform the 4 political actions. On their next turn, they will perform a free election, and the 2 results for the politician become wild results for them. The final military action is terrorize. This is an aggression taken by your armies against enemy civilians, a village or capital. For example, these red armies could terrorize this blue village, or these blue armies in this territory could terrorize this red capital. Something I forgot to mention before, an elite cannot be directly attacked if they share a territory with one of their own armies or capitals. They are protected by either one of those pieces. A capital must be successfully terrorized, or an army successfully attacked. Both of those would need to be dealt with before blue could attack this red elite politician. Alright, back to terrorize. For blue's army to successfully destroy this capital, he must roll his game die. Each blue army brings 1 value of success odds to the attempt, meaning in this situation, blue succeeds only on a roll of 1 or 2. Paying resources for a terrorize only awards you a roll once of this die, so these aren't very good odds. If blue brought more armies, say 5, they would succeed on 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5. These rolls would result in the red capital being removed from the game, returned to their mat. Another important result, if you successfully terrorize an enemy civilian location, that player loses 1 support on their attribute track. Now, a village is much easier to destroy. If red wanted to terrorize blue in this territory, each army brings 2 value success odds against a village. So here, red would succeed on 1 through 4. Blue would lose that village back to their mats and lose 1 support. You are now ready to play Elite. We've covered the core progression of a turn through the 5 global actions in order, and the 12 Elite actions you can perform after your 4th village triggers the free election. To wrap up, I'll return to page 5 to address some minor details and rules. Then, at the conclusion of this video, I will perform an example of final scoring. There are 5 resource types in Elite, and you may have noticed only 4 of them are cards. As you acquire these, they're meant to remain private and secret from other players. However, your gold treasury should be displayed publicly during gameplay. Resources can never be lost in Elite, you can only spend them. But you may trade during your turn with any alliance whose pieces share a territory or border with one of your pieces. This may be done at any time during the global actions. We need to address what occurs at the bottom of the support track. When your marker hits 0, it says possible uprising. You must perform an immediate roll of your game die, and if the results are 1 through 4, a village will leave your alliance. You choose which village from the map to return to your player mat. If an opponent successfully terrorizes one of your locations, this causes you to lose support. If moving that marker takes you to 0, you must immediately roll your game die and possibly lose another village to an uprising. Opposing players may only cause this when you move from 1 to 0. The uprising effect does not continue after 0 on other players' turns. However, when your turn comes back around, if you remain at 0 and then perform actions that cause negative support, then yes, on your turn, you must immediately roll for uprising or uprisings, depending on how many negative deductions you would have taken. This is a dire situation. You should consider performing actions like elect or capitalize, which indirectly boost your support, or the best action for it, propagandize. We have reached the end of Act 3, so let's tally victory points. Players can use one of their optimize or mobilize markers to count along the track, because those are not recorded for any endgame value. The first scoring metric is achievements. Blue completed 2 in this game, so that's 14 points, 7 each. Next is battle tokens. Blue earned 2 battle tokens, so that's 4 more victory points. Control dice, 1 point each. Blue earned 2 unity and 2 tyranny, giving them 4 more points. The next scoring metric is attributes. Now be careful here. A player earns 2 points per attribute on which they ended the game above 5. It does not matter how many marks above 5 they are. This is only 2 potential points for the strength track and 2 potential points for the support track. A maximum of 4. It's either earn the 2, or if you're below 5, don't earn the 2. Let's score blue for 2. Territories is the final scoring metric. It looks like Blue did a pretty good job here with expansion. Each of their pieces, if alone in a territory, earns 1 point. The conflict comes when there is a co-occupation of a territory. In this case here, Yellow has a civilian village piece alongside Blue's army. Villages and capitals take first precedent in scoring territories, so this territory would count 1 point for Yellow. Now, in this agriculture territory, Blue has an army and Red has an elite. Armies take second precedent in scoring, so Blue would get a point here. Elite can only score territories if they are alone in that territory or just sharing it with their own pieces. At a quick glance, it looks like 10 territory points for Blue here. So their final score would be 34 points. Tally the same metrics for all other players, and the winner claims the title of Elite Victor. Thanks again for playing Elite, and thanks for watching. I hope this video was helpful. Please submit any questions over at eliteboardgame.com. Happy gaming, everyone!